Hello, Shirley Adams with program number 9 of this series, Denim Delights. The gold miners a century and a half ago considered this sturdy fabric one of life's necessities. Well, today millions of us all over the world still love it. The fabric usually begins kind of dark in color and rather firm, but with a long life, the color lightens, it softens to a very comfortable feel. And even though the jeans are shot, we hate to give them up. How about giving them a second life in one of these ways I'm going to be showing you, or buy brand new yardage in a couple of shades to give the same effect. I'm going to start out with a piece with some jeans down here that obviously did not have that long life. One of us in my family, I will not mention who, seems to have gained a little weight and outgrew these jeans, so they look very new. But still, unless she gets back down to that size, she might as well cut them up and do something useful with them. Well, what I'm going to do with this pair of jeans, if you can imagine, is turn it upside down and make a vest. Now, the jeans that I made this vest out of were a little bit less gently worn. They were well worn. They had about had it in several places, but still they make a fun vest. Now, I didn't realize how much fun these vests were, or these jeans jackets, until just recently I saw one out in, I saw a whole lot of them, a whole room full of them, in a very pricey store out west. And they started at over $300 and they ended at about $1,400. And they did look just like these recycled jeans. The only difference between them is that, of course, they were embellished to the hilt. They had buttons and bows and glitter and paint and all sorts of things on them. So I'm going to show you a few of those things that you might do. But first of all, we better make that jeans vest. Well, the starting place is to measure how long do you want the vest. And I'm going to measure from my shoulder point up here, right where my shoulder meets my neck. And I'm going to come down, straight down to my waist, and maybe make it just a little bit longer. So whatever that measurement is, that's how long you want your jeans to be. So I'm going to measure that, and that turns out to be right about here. So I'll make a little mark right about here on the jeans so that we can see where it is. These chalk markers are nice to use for that. So that's how long I want the jeans. I'll just turn them upside down now so that you can see a little bit more of what I'm doing with these. So you can start picturing those as, yes, a vest, really? Okay, so I want them this long. Then what I'm going to do, get rid of the legs right away so they won't be in the way, but I'm not going to do it because I still may lose a few ounces and get into these jeans. I'm not really going to cut them off. I'll simulate. Okay. The t-shirt pattern that I showed you last week is what I'm going to use once again for these jeans. I told you it was valuable. And so I want this to be my shoulder point right here at this level. I am therefore going to put the pattern at the same level, and I have the pattern back of this t-shirt pattern, and I'm going to put it right here down the center of the jeans where the center back also will be. And what I would do then is add a seam allowance to that. Well, it already has seams. I'll move this up so that my little white mark, which I have on the other leg, I'll transfer it to this leg. My little white mark is right there where the seam would be. And then I'm going to just trace around this pattern and cut them off at that place. So let me trace that, and I would then cut these off. In fact, just to make it easy, I would probably just add a little bit to it to make sure I had enough. Mark them across there with the chalk and cut them off at that place, and then they're just easier to manipulate. And then after I get to the right point for having lines, then I would probably cut the shoulders just to make sure I have plenty of fabric there. Okay, once these are all cut off, and I'll just fold them under so that you can see that, yeah, it's looking a little bit more like a vest, and don't throw those legs away, certainly. You can use them for a lot of things, including sleeves. They can just as easily be cut up into sleeves and made a jacket instead of a vest. But okay, once we have those cut off, these are going to be the shoulders, that's going to be the waist, and this is going to be what our vest looks like. We have to somehow get rid of this little stopper here at the bottom of the zipper. So you'd rip out some of this stitching. Just get your little ripper and carefully work at that stitching. Don't cut anything apart there because you might want all the fabric that's there. So don't cut, just rip with the ripper, the stitches, and then get the stopper off the bottom of that zipper because you don't want it anymore. So that can come off. Once you get the stitching ripped out, you'll see that metal stopper down there, and you can get rid of all that. Now later, what you do with this zipper is up to you. You can leave it on. Several of the vests that I've seen in the ready-to-wear just left the zipper on, Others of them, instead of leaving the zipper, maybe cut this down to a V in the waist or something of that sort. But you decide. You are the designer when you do this, and you decide how you want to do it. So get all that stitching ripped out over here. We're going to rip out the whole crotch area so that everything's loose. Rip out that curved line around the crotch. Rip out these inseams. Don't cut them off, but rip out the inseams there. You don't want those. And then we're going to turn it over to the back side. And after this is ripped out to about here, up the back, then we can re-stitch this a little bit, because this is what it's going to look like. This is about where the crotch used to be, right here. So I've re-stitched all this up to as much fabric as I had here. I've re-stitched it so that it could just be a solid piece instead of right now. I'm going to take this area out, this wedge here, this is the crotch. It'll eventually be cut out. So that's what you do first. Then go ahead and rip out a little bit of the side seams, not much. What I'm going to rip out of the side seams here is decide on my t-shirt pattern exactly how much of that I need ripped out. So I would just put the pattern on here and rip out the side seams down to about where the armscye, the armhole should end, and quit at that point. Then you can go ahead and stitch the back and front of the leg, but the shoulder seams together, and neaten up that back neckline by cutting it out so that it's just right with your pattern. And the front neckline, you're just going to cut down to a V where the zipper starts. So on that front neckline, I'll wheel these around again. On that front neckline, I would just cut this to a V right about to where the zipper starts. So that's easy enough. Then you put the shoulders together, make the seams up there. You just turn under and perhaps use your serger to finish the raw edges, but turn under all the edges here around the armscye and all around the neck, and you're through with your basic jeans vest. What you still need to do with this, however, is embellish it, because right now it doesn't look too super. Teenagers love these, but not like this. They've got to have some glitter and glitz and fun on it before they're going to wear it. So let's talk about embellishment. And when I said you could make it into a jacket, so let me take this out. This is one of the old legs from the same pair of jeans, so it's the same faded color. And that leg, I just ripped out the inseam and laid it out straight, and then I put the t-shirt pattern for long sleeves on it and cut it out. So it's going to just work. It's just going to fit into the armscye very well, and very easy to convert. And of course, if you are going to use that sleeve instead of having a vest, then be sure that you don't go ahead and hem this edge where the armscye opening is, because you would instead want to sew the sleeve right there. So think ahead and think what your needs are and what you therefore are going to be doing. Okay, then let's think some of the things we can do with this. For one thing, buttons. A la Patrick Kelly doing a lot of these buttons. Okay, I'm just going to put a little piece of denim over the shoulder to show you kind of what it would look like if I put buttons, a lot of them. This is a great place to go through all your buttons, and you have one of this and one of that left over from the card. What are you going to do with it? Why not put them on here? This gets quite heavy. I'm amazed how heavy this little piece is because I stitched on these buttons. Now I, of course, didn't sit down and do it all by hand. That would be a waste when you can do the same thing on machine just quick as a flash. So all these buttons are sewn on by machine. And if you're going to do it by machine, of course, you can't have a shank on that button. That means you do it by hand. So if you're going to do it by machine, make sure that you get all buttons with holes in them. And here's the way I keep, this is a good idea, by the way, those boxes that your checkbooks come in from the bank. I started out maybe years ago with a couple of these boxes and all my buttons fit in it. Buttons reproduce somehow. They keep growing and growing in supply, and by now I have a box for every color. This is simply my pink box, and I have a whole drawer full of other boxes. Well, I'm going to dig down to the bottom where the one-of-a-kind inevitably fall. And here I have a button that's flat and that has a couple of holes in it that can sew on. So on your machine, and before you start any of this, it might not be a bad idea to switch to a denim needle. You can get these jeans needles and you can recognize them easily because they're blue, kind of reminds you of blue denim, and they're heavier, they're really sturdy, and sometimes you have to stitch through a lot of thicknesses when you work with denim, when you hem jeans and so on. So make sure you have some denim needles, those really heavy duty ones. and it'll make your job much easier. In this case, if the needle doesn't look blue to you, it's because I really did not even switch, since I'm just stitching through one layer. Where do I need it? Here's a good space for it, right here. So on my machine, I don't want a foot. Other machines will take a button foot. But on this one, you simply drop the feed teeth here. I already dropped them. If I get it going, there, you saw them click back up perhaps. Now they're up. I don't want them that way because that would force the fabric to move along. I want them down so that it doesn't make the fabric move. And I'm also going to put just the shank down on this machine, and I'm going to push the little button on the machine that says it'll sew on a button, and we shall see if it'll sew it on. So you can see all it's doing is zigzagging in place. And after you zigzag this, just a few times, it's not going to get any wear and tear. I'll push the reverse so that it just locks in place, and I'll cut it off, and we have a button stitched on. That sure is a lot faster than doing it by hand. So it's the way to go. If it's fast and easy, it's only going to take you a short time to sew on a whole lot of them. And I'd sew them across the back of the yoke too. Put them anywhere you want, but a lot of buttons are a fun thing. So that's one embellishment you might do, buttons. You can also go into stores and buy them in pretty bright primary colors instead of using your old ones. If your old ones look kind of tired and dingy colors, get some nice bright primary Crayola colors that you can find. So there's one idea. Another one is these little shaggy hearts. Now we know that denim shags terrifically. It really ravels when you put it through the washer and dryer. Use it to your advantage. Let your fabric speak, as I was telling you on the first of this series. And since it told me it ravels a lot, I decided that, okay, I'll put some little hearts on the shoulder of this vest. So here are some hearts, and this is how they would look on the shoulder. And the way to make these hearts, and the way I did them on this little jacket, on the pocket of it. And if you don't know how something's going to turn out, it's always a nice idea to do it on a pocket, because if you bomb, then so what? Throw the pocket out and start over again, and you haven't lost anything. But I have some one started here. Well, these little pockets with their hearts on, or this jacket with the hearts on the shoulders, started out like this. I first of all fused, and I can hear the paper rustle down here, and I didn't turn on my iron, so I'm not going to fuse this. But first of all, I did fuse some fabric to the inside of this pocket. It's a double layer. It's going to be the pocket. I fused some fabric inside of here first. And then after this was fused in place with the iron and some fusible web in between, then I turned the pocket wrong side out and stitched around these three sides. But do leave a little opening down at the bottom. You've got to turn it right side out. So here's the pocket turned right side out. The red is already in the middle. You can see that it's there. And so with that red in the middle, I'm just going to trace a little heart around here. In fact, I'll just leave the heart on. I won't even bother to take it off. Since I have it pinned in place here, I can just stitch it on. It would be a good idea to have a foot for that. It would be a good idea also to bring the feed teeth up. And I'm going to have it on straight stitch, so I'll just get it there quickly by turning the machine on and off and stitch around this heart. And after the heart is all stitched around, then that's a good time to cut it. So okay, with this stitching, it means when I cut it, when I cut the center, the denim there, after I cut it and then later put it in the machine, it's going to ravel terribly. And that's exactly what we want it to do. So it's a good deal. Okay, I've stitched around the heart, cut it off short, get rid of the heart. This that I was using for a pattern, by the way, is some of the not the fusible, it's the stabilizer. It comes in many brand names, and it's just something nice to use. So I've stitched a heart here, which is not easy to see, but it's there. The fabric is just close to the same color. And then after that heart's stitched on, I want to punch a little hole very carefully with my scissors, because I only want to go through this top layer. I don't want to go through the under layers. And I'm just going to cut through that top layer like this, right up to the stitching line. And I'm just going to cut a lot of slashes all around it to the stitching line. And after I have this all cut, I'm going to put this in the washer, or you might even sew it on the jacket. It doesn't matter. If you just want to wash the pocket without sewing it on the jacket, you can do that. In the case of your jeans, you would be doing this directly on the shoulder parts. You can see there's the red inside. So Put this in the washer, and after you have it all washed, it's going to be mainly raveled out. By the time it takes a trip through the dryer, it'll be finished up the rest of the way, and it'll look like this. So it opens to reveal that heart, and it has all the shag around it, and it's kind of fun. Kids like it, maybe adults like it too. While I was doing hearts there, I put heart buttons on this little jacket too, just because it was fun. And I also lined it in that same heart fabric to make it a total Valentine through and through. So, same thing here on the jeans vest. We have the hearts. So just treat these the same way. You just have the extra layer of fabric there, and do the same cutting, do everything the same way. A little glitter is always fun, teenagers especially. Well, kids do too, younger kids. They all like glitter. Now you can find these rhinestones, and I just put a few of them down there. You might really want to do it upright and cover it completely. I just put a few of them down here that are glued on with some tough fabric glue. They would not go through the washer though. They probably would not go through the dry cleaner. So think carefully what you put them on with. You can also get rhinestones that you sew on. You can get them that have stud type things on the back that have applicators, but the directions will be in the package, whatever kind you buy. So just follow those directions and apply them that way. What I've added to the bottom of this is some fringe. And this is a piece of suede, a piece of ultra suede. It fringes so beautifully, it's so easy to cut, either with scissors or with a rotary cutter. Either way you can cut this. So I'll show you how easily that cuts maybe. Do I have any uncut? No, I cut it all. I was having such fun. I'll just show you on another strip here how easily it cuts. But either with your rotary cutter or with scissors. Just a very easy job of cutting. I have a feeling because this is not completely even, I need an excuse probably to watch a movie. And so as I sat down to watch that movie, that's when I cut all these strips with scissors because they wave a little bit. They aren't completely even. If I wanted those to really be perfect though, I would probably take a straight edge, something very stiff, and put it on my mat, on my cutting mat, and use the rotary cutter so that I could get really nice straight lines. Not with this little 6-inch gauge, but with a larger straight edge so that you can really get straight lines as you roll this along. So you decide what you're most proficient with or what's going to be the best method for you. And after I had that all shagged, all cut, I just top stitched it onto the edge of the jeans. But in this case, if I'd actually be putting it on the vest, of course I'd top stitch it directly down on the vest. I suppose you could make all these separate shoulders if you wanted to and snap them on some way with Velcro or snaps or buttons if you wanted to change and have the same basic vest. But if your family is like so many, there are a lot of outgrown jeans. You don't have to welch on the number of jeans you use. There are a lot of them you can draw from. So another idea. Something else that's kind of a play on the same thing, this western, this is longer that I've cut here. It's a longer, by far, piece of suede, a bigger piece. So it's really shaggy. It goes almost down to the waist. But what I decided on this is it's not a good idea to just cut a rectangle of suede and then put it on a slant. Whatever, see how those little fringe, see how the fringe goes? It goes off sideways when you do that. So what I started with was a piece of fabric this size, this shape, so that it actually was on the angle that I meant to later stitch it on by. And that way they all hang nice and straight. And these are cut, oh, maybe about a 1/4 inch wide. You might want to do yours narrower and have a more prolific looking fringe. Now what I saw with these out west were of course conchos. And what I laughed about when I saw these conchos, and you would of course just stitch a little piece of the suede onto your vest first and then put the ends through the concho and tie it on, is how you'd attach that. But what I laughed about when I saw those out in the very expensive shop is that for many $100s they were using this identical concho that I have here, which I paid 45 cents for in a fabric shop. That's the joy of sewing, isn't it? Only one of them, only one of the many, that you can duplicate things like that so easily. Well, there's another idea. Getting back to the shag, here's another thought in this jacket, which I showed you on an earlier show. But the reason I had this jacket was with all this shag to say, let your fabric speak. If it's going to ravel, let it ravel. Well, the way you would do this type of thing and also anchor it to the shoulders is like this. I'm going to show you about 3 different ways. And before I did all this, I sent several things through the washer and dryer to see exactly how they behave. You can see all the fabrics that I have here. Now some of them, if they're woven, of course, are going to fray. Some of them don't fray very well, and so I wouldn't want to use them. You want them to fray and ravel and wrinkle. I found even t-shirting down here, even though it doesn't ravel because it's knit, even that did very nicely, in that it curled. It gave it some character. It gave it a little personality that it didn't have before it was washed and dried. But here's how woven fabric will do it, the denim that you might use. Okay, sometimes you just see sort of a moss fringe on like that, and I discovered to get that, you cut a piece of fabric about 2 inches wide, and you fold it not quite in half, the underlayer is longer here, and stitch it on. And do kind of overlapping rows there as you stitch it on, just like a roofer does on your house. If you see him start at the peak of the house, you better fire him and get a new roofer, because you want one that's going to start way down at the bottom, way down at the gutter level, and build on top so that those shingles overlap. Well, it's the same way for all this shag. You want it all to overlap. If it looks thicker, if it looks richer, it will overlap. So these I didn't overlap especially, but they would have been better if I had. So I just folded those, and I started here and just stitched these ensuing rows over just right close to the folds, and then that's what I put in the washer and dryer. This is a split piece of fabric. I did both sides the same, and then one side I cut off and put in the washer and dryer, and the other side I kept for a control, so you can see the original. I did nothing to this but stitch it on. Here's what it looked like then when it came out of the washer and dryer. All this nice moss fringe, and that did rather well. So I thought, that's kind of a nice look. That might be used in many places. Here's another one. Now, a lot of times when you see these directions, you see, cut them on the bias. I want to show you here what will happen if you do cut it on the bias. Now, that's your concern, whether you cut it that way or not, but you can see by this selvage that this is cut on the bias. And so there again, like the roofer roofs a roof, you start at the bottom. Now I cut these pieces about 4 inches wide, and as long as the area to be covered needs to be. But then they were folded, not quite in half. You want the double layers like this, and so that both sides show, so that it gives a nice effect when it's all fringed out. So I sewed these, lapping the rows, and then I sat down to cut these. And you just sort of smooth this out of the way, everything that you don't want. I'd start like this, and I would just cut through the bottom row first, and then I'd let down one more row and cut all along through it, and do that row by row so that they don't all coincide, so that the cuts aren't in the same place, so that it all goes back and forth and makes it a richer, a thicker look. And then after you send that through the washer and dryer, here's how it looks. But the problem with this is maybe, I don't know how they do it, since I've seen many directions written to do it this way. I don't know how, because this is what happens. Very easily, these pieces just pull off, and you'd have it looking a little bald after a while. It wouldn't look wonderful when you keep losing your shag all the time. And that's because these threads go at the diagonal. There isn't one long thread to hold them on, so naturally they're going to tear off. So consider it if you don't mind, or if you're not going to do it very often, who cares? Then the other way is to do it on the straight, as I have done here on the bottom row. And on the straight, you can see it's done the very same way. Cut the strips 4 inches wide, and go ahead and shag them the same way. And they come out looking, even though it was the very same, I'm hooked around my button here. I don't know if I can release my watch or not. Even though they were cut the very same way as the bias ones, they come out looking different because they were cut on the straight. So try all those on a scrap and see what you like. Now, another one that I really like that I saw out west is this one. Now, I didn't buy this, or I didn't make this jacket. This was a purchased, very inexpensive jacket that I have here, and it's a Victorian Valentine, and it's probably my favorite. And also, when I saw this Victorian Valentine out west, I noticed the price tag on it was over $1,000. That impressed me a lot. I thought I'd already made mine. I thought, I'm glad I did that. It's kind of fun. This one, I must admit, I'm also going to lose, as I do so many of my clothes. My daughter already has laid claim to it. But with the Victorian Valentine, here's the way it goes. You just collect all the laces and all the cabbage roses that you can find anywhere. And I've cut some of those cabbage roses out, and I've applied them to this. And I'll just put them on this vest instead. And then I've added to it lots of laces, little doilies, some of them antique, some of them new. Just add a lot of little things like this. Now, it takes some arranging. This is a good thing to do. Get all your pieces, get your vest out there, in the TV room and sit down to watch an evening of TV and get all these arranged, because you'll rearrange them many, many times. The first way you put them perhaps isn't the way you want them at all. This is left over from a family wedding gown, so it's nice to have a little bit of memory maybe going on this too. Overlap them. Don't get them all out separate, because they look prettier if they're overlapped. Build up a little bit of thickness there. So whatever laces you have, overlap in various ways. And when you come to something that you think, that's it, I love it, this is finished, it's hard to tell yourself, okay, I'm finished, this is it. What I did on my jacket was just put them on the shoulders. You don't need to do that. You can cover it completely if you want to, but then sew it on. This is going to have to be done by hand, and that means either use these little grippers to pull that needle through, because it's going to be tough on your fingers, or use a little rubber circle. Your fingers will heal in a few days. It'll be okay. The last thing I'm showing you just real quickly is this Rocky Road jacket. And I love it. I use the colors that are inside. It's all quilted, but it's a whole lot of denim all sewn together, and put a little bit of ultra suede flower on top. So it's my favorite. I get to keep it. Nobody's going to confiscate it from me. So this is my jacket. Well, denim is a friendly fabric. It's nice to work with. It's wonderful to wear. And I hope I've given you a few ideas for continuing this friendship into extended wearing. Next week we're going to focus on necklines. Many suits or dresses are collarless, and that makes a perfect background for dramatic jewelry. But for a change of mood, we'll add snap-on collars and other insets, changing the look. Join us to see how these can be made.